In this video, I finally would love to offer you my complete and updated gearing guide for Shadowlands Patch 9.0. I'm sure a lot of you have been waiting for this. I have a lot to say, it will be nice and sequential. Please use chapters in the timeline of the video in case you're interested in a particular item. Otherwise, give the video a like, give me some love, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for more World of Warcraft and other videos, and let's get started without any further ado. Let's gear up! Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, I'm your host Gyro. So we are back again with a gearing guide for casual players. Just one tiny little disclaimer to make sure you're in the right place. This gearing guide is not for people who push hardcore sort of Mythic Plus high-end keys and that kind of stuff. This is for casual players who play solo, who rely on auto grouping using the LFG, who play potentially in LFR. I'm gonna guide those people from dinging 60 to somewhere in the ballpark of 180, 190 item level. That makes you, arguably, as a player in Shadowlands right now, rather competitive to make sure that then later you can just find your own adventure, find your own path in World of Warcraft. So, we'll start with point number 1. When you ding 60, your item level from questing gear, from whatever you've picked up, should be around item level 134 to about 140. It happened to me on some of my tanks because I've done a lot of dungeoning, including at level 59, and that is already fairly decent gear, and I picked up a few pieces here and there from some people who were running dungeons with me while I was leveling up, but they were already level 60. So pay attention to this moment, especially as a tank or even as a DPS. If you're nice to people and you're gearing up using Threads of Fate and running dungeons, then even if you're getting still your item level whatever gear as a 51, 52, 53 level, there could be level 60s in your group. Pay attention to what drops they are getting, and if you're nice to them and if you ask them directly, whisper to them as opposed to put it in a group chat, which works as well, but a social advice for you is to always whisper to people because they like it more. You can say, hey, do you need that piece? And chances are that 50% of those people or more will not need some pieces that drop in those dungeons. However, you will, my friend. So that is how you can arrive at level 60, already having quite a few pieces, 2, 3, 4 pieces here and there, of something that would be much higher item level than you would have as a 59 turning 60. So first thing you do now is you take a look at the map and you take a look at the world boss. It doesn't matter what class you are, what spec you are, world bosses have something potentially very appealing at this stage for everyone. Obviously some world bosses are better for some classes, obviously, but we are going for it anyway. Because each boss has 1 or 2 pieces, in addition to conduits, of item level 207. 207 right now would be ridiculously awesome if you're lucky. Unfortunately in Shadowlands we are very scarce on loot, as you know by now, and there are no systems such as the bonus roll systems like Seals of Broken Fate or whatever they used to be called. So you do need to be lucky, but this is a solid, world bosses are a solid and probably one of the few very worthy systems to continue pursuing on your alts after, you know, you're laying off alts and maybe start working on some other character. But world bosses are very worth killing, and in this particular case, my friend, it's the first thing you're gonna do straight away as you ding 60. There are high chances, relatively high chances to get one of the legendary powers for your class. Again, obviously not every world boss would have a legendary power for every class, but I've been reasonably lucky, and sometimes you could get, as you saw for this hunter for example, alt as an example in the footage in the background, you saw that I got actually one of the best, if not the best, legendary power for marksmanship spec. Unfortunately, marksmanship is not my home spec, but as you've seen in one of the videos earlier, one of the more popular videos on my channel, marksmanship is one of the specs that I switch from Beast Mastery 2 to cheese a little bit of higher DPS when I want to look good in a group and when I want to help my group. That is something also for you maybe to explore if you haven't seen it already. I would then immediately hit auction house. Some good people with the long boy could be with a long boy in Oribos, so you don't need to go all the way to your capital city to go back to the auction house. Worst case scenario you would, but long boys are very common right now in the Ring of Fates in Oribos, so you would be able to access our auction house with no problems. By now prices would have stabilized a little bit and won't be as extortionist as they have been at the start of Shadowlands expansion, just because there is a higher competition between crafters by now, and there is certainly much more plentiful supply of materials. That certainly helps in this regard a lot. You need to look for Dark Moon deck trinkets. Take a look for Dark Moon deck trinkets. They are item level 200, which is a huge boost right now to your item level, and often it has also quite a useful effect and proc from the ones that I've seen. It's relatively inexpensive considering the present day and age of Shadowlands and how much money you can make just through questing, selling this and that, and if you do some crafting and some other kind of stuff, you can definitely make up enough gold to afford one of those trinkets, and it's a massive increase to your item level. Your ultimate goal obviously is to push your item level higher so that you can access further content. Additionally, while you're there, take a look at the prices of some, and look obviously for cheap blue crafted item level 168 gear. It is naturally to fill in the gaps and continue pushing your item level higher towards unlocking heroic dungeon ilevel requirement, entry requirement, which is item level 155. Do not buy any necks or any cloaks from auction house at this stage, and I will explain to you very shortly why not. Depends if you're a crafter yourself and if you were bothered to grind Venari rep in the Maw on any of your alts. You could, as a crafter, you could get your hands on Crafter's Mark number 2. This is something that allows crafters to craft that item level 168 gear versus the baseline cheap and cheerful 151s. Sure, when you are dressed in 134, 140, your top level blues, crafted blues of 151 are already an improvement, and we will talk about that in a second. However, if you can craft 168 gear because you were grinding rep, because you got Crafter's Mark number 2, because you watched my Crafter's recommendations video, for example, I don't want to go too deep into that, then obviously you don't need to buy this stuff, right? Obviously you would be able to do it all yourself. But if not, then, well, then you're either buying or you're crafting in this particular case, right? Final thing to say here, obviously, is that if you know, which I assume you know and you're self-aware when you're planning your journey, if you know that you don't have too much gold and you don't have a rich uncle of an alt, yes, or main in this case, you should have planned for this and you should have watched my crafting recommendations video, and I recommend that while leveling, you pick up, like I know that in my video for crafting I said, look, pick up, for example, skinning and leatherworking. I would recommend now to just pick up gathering professions, say skinning and mining. So throughout your whole leveling journey you should have been collecting materials. Now is the time, if you went down that path, if you knew that basically at this stage in your gearing endgame you would be relying on some of crafting that you would have to do yourself. Now is the time for you to naturally mail all those collected crafting materials such as leather, bones, whatever, to your crafter, unless it is this particular alt that you're playing that is crafter. Well, then it's an unnecessary point. Okay, now I would go for PvP gear, especially if we are just under, let's say, heroic dungeon eye level entry bracket still. PvP gearing is probably the best gearing system that has been implemented the best way in Shadowlands. I am not a fan of gearing options and what they've given us in Shadowlands. I think it's very meh. I've been waiting a long time to learn and see, as a casual, from a casual perspective, what other options I have. And in this complete guide I'm telling you everything, all of my findings. But PvP gear and gearing system still appears to be the most well-cooked, most all-rounded, proper system of gearing that you can rely on, depending how much you like PvP, as heavily or as lightly as you like. At this stage, You could do some PvP for honor points. Yes, you could start doing it. You also, as some people say to me in the comments, you also could have definitely PvP'd on your way to 60. Some people do it for leveling purposes. As far as efficiency and speed of leveling, not gearing, but leveling is concerned, I recommend against PvPing on the way to 60. I actually do. Because unless you love PvP, because then all of this is cancelled instantly, then you PvP and be happy, right? But PvP can be frustrating, lengthy matches, you don't always win, which is the most important part, and that's critical when you compare your leveling experience of PvP to, let's say, dungeon runs. And even if you win a battleground and get those honor points that you're after, the win doesn't give you anywhere near enough experience to compare to a finished dungeon run, which pushes 50,000k of points of experience. So it's just inefficient, which is why I'm saying to you once again, I would PvP now if you want to fill in some gaps and if you want to get some honor points to buy baseline item level 158 gear to basically push yourself sufficiently and high enough to get into heroic dungeons. I would obviously try to fill in first your lowest unfilled spots in your gearing, right? The ones that naturally have the lowest eye level green gear right now, most likely something like 134 item level. The best part is naturally that if you don't mind PvP, you can keep doing PvP and keep upgrading any piece of PvP gear. First you get it at 158, then you upgrade it for about 500 honor points, but it depends on the piece of gear that you're getting. Some are cheaper, some are more expensive. You upgrade it to 168, and then you upgrade it to heroic dungeon item level 171 and beyond. You could keep going. Alright, point number 7 is it's not necessarily 100% sequential, obviously, and this step could have been done in between of others that I've been telling you about, but you have no choice but to unlock your sanctum. Make sure you have a soulbind, because these are necessary steps to proceed in the campaign, to get to the first quests from Bolvar, who will send you to the Maw, and eventually you will meet Venari. So you need to talk to Venari. If you don't know who Venari is yet, and it's your first character, this is something that's inevitable for you on your progression for the campaign and gearing further. Once you go to the Maw and once you meet Venari, first thing is to unlock Torghast Tower, okay? And that unlock itself will give you an blue item level 161 neck piece. That's why I told you don't buy necks from auction house earlier. Once you go through Torghast, you do that little quick run. First run probably will be maybe even moderately enjoyable for you, especially if you haven't done it much before. You come back, you finish the run, you come back to Bolvar, you get your neck piece, and he will pretty much straight away send you back to do another exploration of Torghast and get 171 cloak. That is why we didn't buy cloak from the auction house either. And that's your first, probably will be the first piece that would be heroic dungeon item level. So that's pretty good. Now, while we're here and while we're talking about Torghast, if you're new here, you do not know me that well, but I'm generally seeing myself as a self-proclaimed advocate, I suppose, for the gaming community of World of Warcraft players, especially veterans. I think we deserve more loot, more fun in the game, and that's pretty much all I advocate for. And in this particular case, I'd like to ridicule this moment that they have revealed this news that they, for those of us who want to plunder Torghast, they are apparently improving the system by unlocking the top layer of Torghast that's unlocked on all of your alts, so that alts can access that level straight away, layer straight away, as opposed to having to grind it themselves. In order to start plundering it, I've even overlaid here definition of plundering and what I am latching on to here, and don't worry, I'm not gonna rant about it for too long, but I just think they're kidding us, come on. There is nothing in Torghast aside from Soul Ash that we will use to craft legendaries. We'll talk about that literally in a second. And other than that, it's just like mockery. And that's why I think I can ridicule this. They shouldn't dare saying plunder Torghast. There is nothing to plunder there. So we are going to now proceed towards sort of, well, it's not very lengthy, but a very necessary system of unlocking legendary crafting. First, we free rune cover in Torghast. I have a full-on video about legendary crafting. If you're very interested in that, please visit the channel, take a look at the video, subscribe and like the video to just tell me that I've done a good job. If you find it helpful, that really helps me, and that only takes a second of your time. So why not give me a thumbs up? The goal obviously here is to craft your first legendary, the good one hopefully, as quickly as you can. And that will give you power, and it will push your item level much higher, bringing you closer to heroics and LFR levels, which for us casuals is kind of that goal that we're going for really in our gearing, at least in a guided format, because beyond that, the world's your oyster, and the world basically becomes either higher levels of raiding, organized raiding, or higher keys of Mythic Plus. That's about it. That's all she wrote. That's all they've given us in Shadowlands. And yes, if you sense the disappointment in my voice, it is because I am disappointed still. It will take you multiple runs of Torghast to get enough soul ash to craft your first legendary. I'd say it probably will take you a week if you grind all available wings of Torghast at the top possible level, if I'm not mistaken, as well as doing the quests from Bolvar in between that will throw in a little bit of soul ash here and there for you. If you are a two-handed weapon class or spec, you need to watch my video that tells you how to do a little fun chain of quests that gives you a pretty much free two-handed sword from Maldraxxus. That would be a pretty amazing item level 180 epic at this stage. Who would say no to that as a Retribution Paladin, as a Death Knight, as a warrior? You can boost once again with this piece, you can boost your item level further. So do not omit those kind of things. Those little gifts, especially if they're easy, they definitely have place in my guide because it's a complete guide as I see it. Now we should be almost at item level 155, and that is when you basically unlock access to heroic dungeons. Easy queuing, good gear, relatively good gear at this stage, especially for casuals. Start queuing for heroics while continuing to do and proceed with your Covenant questline, Covenant campaign. That will give you occasional gear as well. That gear is not tremendous, but it will be also 168, 171, those kind of pieces. In my experience, as you do other things, as you kill world bosses, as you craft legendary, as you run heroics, Covenant campaign gear will not keep up with your gearing needs, so to speak, at the pace at which you will need that gear. So you will outgear it through other sources is my point, but you still need to do this to proceed with the campaign. Now, when we talk about heroics, as you queue for heroics, as you do heroics, one very important thing that I want you to understand about dungeons that you may not be to the forefront of your understanding right now. Don't forget that a lot of people queuing for dungeons are geared already. I mentioned it as the very first point when you were still leveling and about to ding 60, on your way to 60. Those geared people could have been giving you gear. So this is one other reminder, social tip. Whisper to people when they get gear. Ask if they need it. A lot of people will share gear, and instead of, say, grinding and upgrading, grinding PvP honor points and upgrading your pieces of gear to ilevel 171 very expensively, in my opinion, this is a much easier, faster way to do it. Obviously, this process is much easier for tanks and healers, tanks specifically, because the queue is almost instant and the situation is fully in your control. You can run as fast or as slow as you want and queue up as many times as you want. If you're a tank or a class with a tanking specialization, consider learning to tank, my friend, and switching to that role when you want a quick dungeon run and gear, basically. I have published enough guides that the goal of those have been to teach my fellow casual players who maybe never considered this because they're a bit tentative on tanking, but there are some guides on how to tank, especially those 4 very first dungeons that you level through, for example, or the ones that you can choose to target. Another important point, and something for you to understand in case you don't know. In Shadowlands they changed the system, allowing you to specifically queue for a particular heroic. Because these heroics don't lock out now for a day as they used to. Before, if you chose a specific heroic and you ran it, it was locked out for that day. You could not queue deliberately for that heroic again. You can only do random. Now I'll mention queuing for Mythics, Mythics plus 0, baseline Mythics, and Mythics plus. Yes, you can, yes, you should, if you especially feel confident, and especially if you are somewhere at least around 170, 165 if you're lucky. It's much higher for DPS, as it's always been higher for DPS, because ilevel requirements from people who are recruiting into their groups are borderline extortionist. Everyone wants to blast through the content rather than do it slow and steady and barely make it sometimes, yeah. Once again, it's much easier for tanks and it's much easier for people who make their own groups. But again, if you are a relatively undergeared DPS and if you have no healer with you, for example, paired up, if you have no social connections, no guild, no nothing else, it's gonna be a bit hard. So for DPS, expect to have to overgear content severely to queue for Mythics, which is why Mythics for me are not at the moment a thing that I would particularly recommend. But as a tank, I'm cool with Mythics. I do very low keys as a casual because it's not stressful and it's kind of fun. So yeah, that is my advice to you, my friend. At this stage, you probably and should be at the item level enough to start confidently queuing for LFR. LFR is basically a guaranteed win, just takes a bit of patience queuing up and takes a bit of patience of running with everyone and surviving maybe a couple of wipes. By now, most of the Castle Nathria raid is open. There are a lot of interesting pieces. It's an interesting experience itself. And before previous expansion, Battle for Azeroth patch 8.3, Horrific Visions, before that has become available to us and became a staple for this channel. And I started doing a lot of content there, doing solo progression in terms of gearing and power and all of that kind of stuff. It was super exciting. My goal, my journey was basically level an alt to the level sufficient to hit LFR, do as much as I can in LFR, switch to another alt. That's how I used to play. Tell me in the comments down below if that's how you played. I feel that with all my frustration with Torghast, that is lootless. There is nothing to plunder there. There is nothing in Torghast of interest to me, because I was hoping it would be like Horrific Visions and it would be a nice solo progression system for gearing, but I'm excluding Torghast from it. Yes, you can get Soul Ash. Yes, you can get legendary powers from Torghast, and it's sad that they locked us into that horribly boring experience to get that. And yes, there are 2, 3, 5, 6 cosmetic items somewhere from higher, boring as hell layers of Torghast in Twisting Corridors. That's not gearing, that's mockery to me, which is why I'm excluding this. Anyway, that's about it, my friends. You start running LFR, that is where I draw my line of being a casual player. That's as much as I want to invest of my efforts into this, and that's as much fun as I'm gonna have. And all this, my friends, should push you into the item level brackets of about 190, if you're lucky, with some also low Mythic plus keys, especially with people sharing loot, and world bosses, you probably push 200. That would be pretty damn nice. I hope you enjoyed this little guide. It is complete as far as I'm concerned. Of course, there is something else to say as an honorable mention, and that is to keep an eye on the world quests. I did not include this particularly because world quests are also one of those undertuned systems, in my opinion, that lag behind in terms of providing good gear of sufficient item level to you compared to other sources such as PvP, such as heroics, such as low mythics, such as LFR, and obviously world bosses. But keep an eye on the map. If you have nothing to do and if you're waiting in a queue for LFR, nothing hurts you from periodically looking at the world map, at the Shadowlands map, and seeing if there is a particular piece that just happens to be of a sufficient or high enough item level to fill in a gap in your gearing, outfit and loadout, and so on and so forth. I am not a fan of world quest rewards this time around. They seem illogical to me, and by that I mean that sometimes you look on the map and you are of a certain item level. Everything on a world map should scale as far as I'm concerned, as far as blue rewards from the world quests are concerned, but then one piece could be still ilevel 134, while another one is 168. It makes absolutely no sense to me. I think it's an undertuned, awful system that hopefully, I'm very hopeful, I'm just giving you an honest spin here on patch 9.0, but I'm hoping that this, among other things, including Torghast, etc., would be improved in 9.1, and that's when we will revisit the guide again, when the time comes, especially if they make any substantial changes to gearing process. Like I said, I really appreciate your patronage, staying with me, sticking with me, watching some other videos while I try to entertain myself and others with some Minecraft dungeons, for example. But I still play World of Warcraft, I have alts, I have stuff to talk to you about. Please don't forget that if you don't talk to me in the comments down below, I don't know what you want. So if you sit there thinking that I read your mind and I will always produce interesting content, it is as much on you as it is on me. So let's please treat this as a nice, friendly club as it was always intended to be. I always welcome feedback, especially if it's not toxic and not trolly. And I will try and make it interesting for you when I can, if I can. So thanks very much for tuning in once again. Please subscribe to the channel. Maybe turn on notification bell to make sure that you don't miss my uploads if you would like to both support me with your views and just not miss good content, because YouTube algorithm works in mysterious ways right now. Nobody knows exactly what's happening. A lot of people were missing my videos, I was told in the comments in some cases. So let's stick together. Hopefully World of Warcraft will improve in the next patch, and hopefully those news will come to us also fairly soon, because it's almost February 2021. Thanks again, my friends. Lengthy outro, but hopefully worth your while. I'll be speaking with you again sometime soon enough. See you later. Bye bye.